death of the firstborn. So Moshe Levin tells Paro, the plague is going to happen around midnight. Not exactly midnight, around midnight. The commentaries are wondering, why does it say around midnight? The answer is that the astrologers of the Pharaoh, they mistakenly may think that the plague is not exactly happening at midnight because of their calculations. And Moshe Rabbeinu said it's going to happen exactly at midnight. So because they may make an error and they may misinterpret the time of midnight, therefore, in order not to give room for them to think that Moses is lying, therefore he says around midnight will be the plague. The question though was like this: why did the Pharaoh have to know what time was going to happen at all? Why was it important for him to know the exact time? By all other plagues, it doesn't say what time the plague started. And so here it's important to tell when it's going to start, exactly when it's going to start, and so much so to tell him you shouldn't even be a room to think that it's off. Why is it so important? Another thing that is unique about this plague is that by all the other plagues, Jewish people didn't have to do anything special in order to protect themselves from the plague. However, by this plague, they had to do something unique. They had to put on the doorpost the blood of the circumcision and the blood of the Paschal lamb, and the purpose of putting the blood there was to protect themselves from the angel of death. The angel of death is going to destroy all the Egyptians. In order that the angel of death shouldn't come to the Jewish homes too, therefore they have to. It's disturbing. In order to shouldn't attack the Jewish homes too, so therefore they had to put on the doorpost the blood of the circumcision, and to show that this home is different.
Circumcision?
Yeah.
How did I never heard that before.
Yeah, the blood of the circumcision and the blood of the Paschal lamb.
So I mean, everybody had to get circumcised that night?
Yeah. In fact, it's interesting. The Talmud says that not everyone wanted to get circumcised, and God made a miracle that the lamb that Moses offered should have this amazing fragrance. That fragrance should spread throughout Egypt, and everyone who didn't want to get circumcised before wanted to get circumcised because there was some kind of divine aroma in Moses' sacrifice. Therefore, a lot of people who weren't interested before agreed to be circumcised then. Anyway, so another thing that's unique about this plague is that by all other plagues, there's no instruction of God, everyone stay at home. Quarantine. They want to be quarantined. Everyone go outside, and nothing would happen to them. Only by this plague was there this unique thing that everyone has to stay at home. The question is, why was this plague different that they had to stay at home? So one explanation is that by all other plagues, there was a certain limit, certain method that the plague used to inflict damage upon the Egyptians. The plague of blood, for example, it harmed them, but it harmed them by the water being transformed to blood. So since there was a certain limit, certain filter, if you will, of how the angel of death could exercise his attack on the Egyptians, therefore there was no need to have the Jewish people to protect themselves, because it wasn't like he didn't have a carte blanche license to attack any way he wanted, and therefore there was already some kind of filter there, and therefore the Jewish people didn't have to protect themselves. That's what you might want to answer why the plague of the firstborn was unique, in that the angel of death could kill them any way he wanted to, and because it was a unique license, therefore the Jewish people need to have a something to show that they're different, because the angel of death has more reign. That's one explanation. A deeper idea, that same concept, is that by all the other plagues, it says the purpose of the plague in order that the Egyptians should know that God is God. So who needs to have the plague? Those who don't know that God is God. So therefore the Jewish people who already did know that Hashem is God, they need the plague. That's by the first 9 plagues. But the purpose of the plagues was, as God said, that they should know that I am God. But the plague of the firstborn, this was totally about destroying the firstborn, not about refining them and elevating them and making them have a connection to godliness. But it was about destruction. So then the angel of death could say, why are these, the Jews, different than the Egyptians? Why do they not deserve to be punished as well? The Jewish people are also idolaters, as the Egyptians are. So why they were sunk into the 49th gate of impurity. So there's room to think that the angel of death, the angel that represents God's justice, he should mete out justice not only to the Jews, not only to the Egyptians, but also to the Jews. Now, it does say, when we say this in the Haggadah, that God himself came to Egypt to give the plague. It says, I myself came down. I, not an angel. I am not a messenger. I myself came down. However, it's not only God. It also says the angel of death was there as well. And so basically it comes out two things. Since there was a free reign to the angel of death to kill the Egyptians any way he wanted to, therefore Jewish people need to have a sign to show that they were different. Number two, the Jewish people also had to stay at home and So number one, God said don't go outside. Number two, not only should not go outside, but even in their homes need to have a special sign in order to protect themselves from the angel of death. So the question is still about the attribute of justice. It's not about just the factual fact that this angel of death is running around killing people, so he might kill the Jews too. There's a problem. We asked, what's the reason the angel of death has to be able to kill people? Because they deserve death. So the attribute of justice has a point. The Jews deserve death too. They're also idolaters. How does a sign in their homes protect them if they're deserving of death, just like the Egyptians are? So they have signs in their home. The signs in their home doesn't address their liability for punishment because they're also idolaters. Who cares if they have signs in their home? This is a Jewish home. Jews are also the attribute of justice was saying the Jews deserve to die too. What's the point? What's the meaning of that? Signs in their home. That's why they're protected. So this is the explanation of why the plague had to happen at midnight. The truth is that if looking at things from the perspective of justice, indeed, the Jewish people would be culpable of punishment as the Egyptians were. However, that's only if you're looking at things from the realm of logic and justice. However, the plague of the smiting the firstborn, this plague came from God himself, was beyond logic and beyond the calculations of justice, and therefore there's no room for the claims that could have been made. Yes, the claims could have been made, but God rescued the Jewish people himself, and he went beyond the normal order of justice. And that's the reason why it had to happen at midnight. What's the idea of midnight? Midnight is a time when there is a revelation of that which is beyond the spiritual cosmos. In general, nighttime is associated with justice. Light is not there, light is hidden. But in nighttime itself, there are different parts of the night. The first part of the night, as it gets darker and darker, is associated with Gvura. There's more Gvura in the first half of the night, where Hashem is making the light less and less. The second half of the night, as it starts to get brighter, is associated with Chesed, Hashem's kindness. So the moment of midnight, it fuses together Chesed and Gvura. It fuses together two opposite things. How can it fuse together two opposite things? It's because in the moment of midnight there's a revelation, that which is beyond the spiritual cosmos. Therefore, it can fuse together these two halves of the night. So, in other words, in the plague of the firstborn, there was revelation of the love that God has for the Jewish people that comes from his essence. A love that's beyond any kind of calculation. A love that's beyond any kind of definition. Indeed, if you look at the Jewish people, you would say Esau is the brother to Yaakov. Esau was like Yaakov, the Egyptians are like the Jews. They're both doing the wrong thing. They're both immersed and obsessed with impurity, with the wrong things. So looking at things from logically, according to justice, Esau is the brother to Yaakov. But God says, I love Esau, I love Yaakov. I love Yaakov. Despite the fact that Esau is a brother to Yaakov, and they look the same, nevertheless, it's my kid, it's my child. Doesn't matter if it makes sense. Doesn't matter if it's logical. I love my kid. So that's why Moses told the Pharaoh exactly when the plague was going to happen. In order that the Pharaoh and his astrologers would be able to understand why this was happening. if he would tell them, well, the Jewish people are being rescued and all the Egyptian firstborn are going to be killed because we deserve to be freed, Pharaoh knows what's going on. Pharaoh knows the Jews are also sunk in the 49 gates of impurity. What are you talking about? You guys are so much better than us? Doesn't make any sense. It's not going to happen. So therefore, Moses told him it's happening at midnight in order to tell him that this is not about refinement and elevation. It's about destruction. The Egyptians are going to be destroyed. And the reason why we're not going to be destroyed is because this is something which comes from the love of Hashem, which is beyond all logic and reason. But that still leaves us with a question. If that's true, that God revealed His love for us, then what's the point of the signs? If we're talking about a love that comes from God's essence to every one of us, so then we shouldn't need any signs. What's the other sign? The answer is that even something which is beyond the spiritual cosmos, which is beyond any kind of definition, all godly flow, Hashem wants that should be brought to the world through our efforts. So yes, it exists in a way that's intrinsic. The love that God has for us is intrinsic. It's not conditional. And yet Hashem wants, in order for this love to be revealed in this world, in order to make this something that's manifest, to do something to bring it down. And therefore we have to do something in order to channel this love. To do something though that's similar to what we're trying to draw down. Just like we're trying to draw and reveal God's love for us, which is beyond logic and reason, so too we have to do something also in ourselves that's also beyond logic and reason. And that's why the sign on the Jewish homes on that night, the night of the killing of the firstborn, what was the sign? The sign was the blood of circumcision and the blood of the Paschal Lamb. Both of those signs expressed a devotion to God beyond logic and reason. When a Jew has a circumcision, it's not connected to logic. Take an 8-day-old child and you circumcise him. He's not ready for anything. And so too, the mitzvah of the Paschal Lamb doesn't make any sense because the Egyptians worship the Paschal Lamb. And God didn't just say to slaughter it secretly, and He said, take it into your home for 4 days before. And Master ben Charash said, why did God say take it in your home for 4 days before? So the Egyptians will ask you, hey, why is my God in your house? What are you doing with my God? What's the matter with you? We should tell them, we should have the fortitude to tell them that we were commanded by God to take this lamb and offer as a sacrifice to God. That absolute devotion to God beyond logical reason, that elicited the love of God to us beyond logical reason. That made it manifest. It made something that was not just existed, but actionable. We did an action to draw this love down, and therefore it caused it to be revealed. So this also explains another thing. Our sages say that it was the merit of our faith in God that we were redeemed from Egypt. The Jewish people believed, the Torah says that by Yamin Ham people believed in redemption, and it was because of their faith in God that God redeemed them. Why is faith relevant? Again, it's the same thing. Faith, the blood of the circumcision, and the blood of the Paschal Lamb, all express this idea of devotion to God beyond logical reason. Making a covenant with God, an everlasting covenant. No matter what happens, we're going to love God. Even though they were not 8 days old, but the idea of circumcision is we're making this commitment to you, we're tattooing it into our flesh, and we're bringing this Paschal Lamb, despite the fact that this is what the Egyptians worship. This is something that expresses a devotion to God beyond logical reason, and so to our faith in God. Despite the fact that we're in Egypt for over 200 years, we believe that God's going to take us out of Egypt. That's something that was unfathomable. I mean, in Egypt, not one slave could leave Egypt. It was impossible for anyone to leave. And here we're saying that everyone's going to leave. 3 million people are going to leave from Egypt. It didn't make any sense. But this simple faith we had in God, despite all the torture that we were experiencing throughout the slavery, despite the fact that Pharaoh was bathing in Jewish children's blood, and yet we believe no, God's going to take us out of Egypt. In that circumstance, while that's happening, that defended us against the accusation of the attribute of justice, who's saying why the Jews different than the Egyptians. We expressed our love and our devotion to God beyond logical reason, and that brought down God's salvation also from a place which is beyond logical reason. There's any calls so far?
Yes.
Any questions so far?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not doubting it. I understand why circumcision could be at the same time as the Paschal Lamb. That resonates to me. But we make such a big deal that on the third day of circumcision is so painful, that you can kill the whole village of Shechem, so forth and so on. And then, how many days was it between that and the time of splitting the Red Sea?
They had to leave that night. They had to go that night.
They had to go that night, yes, but then...
And 7 days later.
7 days later.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. How they're traveling so easily. Must have been some miracles involved in their...
Yeah, and you would think that would be publicized as well.
That's a very good point.
Okay.
Okay, so regarding the idea that will happen at midnight, Mechilta brings two opinions about this midnight thing. One opinion is that the creator of night divided the night, and the other opinion is the one who knows the time, the one who knows the hours, he is the one who divided the night. Those are the two opinions in the Mechilta. The creator divided the night, or the one who knows the times divide the night. What are they discussing? What's the argument? So Radvaz explains like this. The difference between the two opinions is as follows. According to the first opinion, God, who has created the night, he stopped the orbit of the hosts of heaven. He stopped the orbit of the planets, and he stopped it in order that the first half of the night and the second half of the night are divided. According to the second opinion, there was no miracle needed to happen. God, who knows exactly what time is what, he knows exactly every moment. So even though a human being cannot know exactly when midnight is, but God, he does, and he knew exactly when midnight is. That's the second opinion. So we need to understand the inner meaning of these two opinions. And why was there a need, especially according to the first opinion, for there to be a miracle, for God to stop the orbit of the planets in order to make the plague happen exactly at midnight? What does that mean? Understand the question?
Well, that would confound the astrologers for sure.
So he changed the order.
You stop rotation.
Stop the rotation.
Yeah. Because that would stop at midnight. When we're 180 degrees opposite the sun, it's midnight.
It says in the Mechilta. Mechilta says one is that the creator of night divided the night. Second opinion is that the one who knows the time of the night, he is the one who divided the night. So there's no miracle, just God knew exactly when to do it. A human being can't know, but he does. So the explanation of the two opinions is as follows. It's certain that the divine flow of the miracle of the killing of the firstborn came from beyond the spiritual cosmos. The argument between these two opinions is about how did this divine flow how was it manifest in this world? According to the first opinion, that God divided the night. This divine flow, which was beyond all the spiritual cosmos, was also something that entered this world in a way that was completely beyond nature and beyond time. According to nature and time are not a vessel for this divine flow beyond the spiritual cosmos. And therefore God had to make a miracle and stop time and stop the orbit in order for this miracle to be manifest in the world, because it had to break it. Because it couldn't fit into it.
So in other words, like in our country, we have 3 time zones. Right? Midnight in New York, it's not the same as Los Angeles. But if you stop rotation, and midnight is midnight for as long as it takes to do throughout the entire land.
What was just the slaughtering of the lamb takes so long, and the circumcision, all those things had.
No, this is the killing of the firstborn.
Killing the firstborn.
You stop the rotation with the killing of the firstborn.
Why did this have to happen to kill the firstborn?
So that's what he's saying. Since this was a miracle which is beyond the spiritual cosmos, and it wouldn't fit into time, wouldn't fit into nature, therefore, according to the first opinion, God had to break nature and stop time in order for it to happen.
Because otherwise, I mean, if you look at Egypt, is not as big as the United States, but if you look at that, it would be like, okay, if it's midnight in New York, then all the people in Los Angeles and the Midwest will be spared.
So,
and vice versa, as it goes across.
According to the second opinion, it wasn't a miracle. It was a miracle that the Egyptians were killed, but the timing of the miracle wasn't a miracle. God just knows exactly when midnight is. According to that opinion, what that opinion is also saying is that the divine flow that came down to the world at this time wasn't something that couldn't fit in the world. It could fit in the world. So there's an advantage of the second opinion regarding the divine flow and how it impacted the world. In other words, in our eyes, it's a much bigger miracle if it breaks if it stops everything. But the truth is, what's considered more of a divine feat is like the story of Purim, where things happen according to nature. The divine flow enters into the physical world. But the Torah says, whenever you have two opinions, both opinions are the words of the living God. And there is, in this, since both opinions are the words of the living God, we have to say that both things are true. So the light of Hashem, which is beyond the spiritual cosmos, it was vested in nature, it was vested in time. As a second opinion, the one who knows what time to make the miracle knew did it according to it didn't break time, it made it within time. And yet, at the same time that this went within nature, it still was revealed beyond as something that was manifest beyond nature at the same time. It went within nature and beyond nature, within time and higher than time at the same time. Why? The killing of the firstborn, it was the last plague. It was the first step or beginning of the giving of the Torah. What's the giving of the Torah about? The giving of the Torah is about there being a fusion between that which is beyond nature and nature. And therefore, by the killing of the firstborn also, there had to be the fusion of these two things within time and beyond time. Because it was a prelude to the giving of the Torah, which brings godliness, which is beyond creation, within creation. In general, we saw something similar by the entire story of the Exodus of Egypt. On the one hand, Egypt remained in control. They were still a kingdom. It wasn't a God, there was no Egypt and there was no Pharaoh anymore. Jews walked out. The Jews were still in Egypt, and Egypt was still a monarchy. And it was a monarchy that was so powerful that not one slave could leave Egypt. And yet they all left anyways. So it's the same idea of within nature, yet totally beyond nature. So, since we mentioned before that the reason we had to do the circumcision, the reason we had to do the Paschal Lamb, was in order to connect to this love of God beyond logic and reason. But now that we add another aspect to this, that the divine flow wasn't just beyond logic and reason, it also went within nature. So we have to say that a similar thing also happened by the circumcision and the Paschal Lamb, that it wasn't just something that was beyond, it also must have been something which was within as well. Because they had to draw this divine flow to be within the world as well, be manifest and revealed in the world. So, regarding the circumcision, it says that the circumcision has to be done, has to be done in physical flesh. It is a love of Hashem beyond logic and reason, that's what it expresses. But what is it? It's in the lowest part of the body. So too the Paschal Lamb. The Paschal Lamb was a physical sheep. It wasn't even part of the body. It's something outside of the body. So it was a sheep. It wasn't a divine flow within the person. The divine flow which was extending beyond outside the person into his property. So because the Jewish people, with these two commandments, not only did they exhibit their devotion to God beyond logical reason, but they also connected with the physical world as well, with their bodies and with their property. That's why they were able to draw down this light of Hashem to be within a vessel, to be revealed in the world. And that's also why we find something unique about this Paschal Lamb, which is different than all their sacrifices. All their sacrifices are not about a meal, not about eating. The Paschal Lamb is about eating. You could eat other sacrifices too, but that's just a separate mitzvah. The mitzvah to offer the sacrifice, and another mitzvah to eat the sacrifice. By the Paschal Lamb, it's unique. It's about eating it. Why is it about eating it? The reason is because the idea of the Paschal Lamb is about internalizing this devotion to Hashem beyond logical reason in ourselves, in our physical body. Although eating is something that we are similar to animals in fact that we eat. The Gemara says there are some things that we are similar to animals. One of them is eating. And so because the idea of the offering the Paschal Lamb was about bringing down this infinite devotion to Hashem in ourselves in a natural, down-to-earth way, therefore the sacrifice is about a meal. It's about bringing it into yourself. And what part of yourself? The part of yourself that is similar to an animal, the part of yourself that needs to eat. So the true idea of freedom is not just that the soul is free from the limitations of the body or free from limitations of the animal soul. The true idea of freedom is that the animal soul and the body is free as well. And not just the body is free or the animal soul is free, but that our area in the world, our homes, our property is also free. And so there, and that in our body, in our animal soul, and in our property, there's a revelation of the light of our soul that should be revealed there as well. So therefore, the preparation Pesach was about true freedom, freedom of the soul, freedom of the body, freedom of the animal soul, freedom about our property. So that's why, on the one hand, there was faith. What's faith? Faith is freedom of the soul. We were discussing yesterday at the farbrengen. Freedom means, faith in Hashem means that it's not even a kapishke, not even an ounce of idolatry. Is kapishke Russian?
Kapushka grip, mushroom.
Oh, that's something else. Kapishke in Yiddish means a tiny bit. So the Rebbe said a tiny bit of idolatry is also idolatry. So when we left Egypt, we had to have an expression of our faith in God. We had to have an expression of our soul, full expression of the soul, faith. And then the second thing is we had to have a circumcision on our body to free our body as well. And we had to also have to offer the sheep. We had to also have a freedom in our property. And since, in order to bring something down to such a low level, it must come from a much higher place. Therefore, we must say that as high as a divine energy in circumcision, and the fact that it leaves it connected with the physical body, and as high as the divine flow in the Paschal Lamb, it must be that the divine flow in the Paschal Lamb is even higher, because it doesn't just descend in the body. The divine flow in the Paschal Lamb descends into our property. And that's the true expression of the freedom, the Jewish people, the great wealth that they left Egypt with, and until there was a freedom in their property, in their physical property, they didn't have full freedom. That's what we find, that the blood of the circumcision, the blood of the Paschal Lamb, that the blood of circumcision was a preparation of the blood of the Paschal Lamb. In other words, what's higher? The thing you're preparing for. So what's beyond the circumcision, where do you see the infinite flow of godliness when it extends beyond the body, but extends also in the property? The Torah says like this: just like God took us out of Egypt and showed us wonders then, He will show us wonders again when Mashiach will come. And just like we left Egypt, it was the merit of our faith in God, and it was just our open faith in God, but it was the fact that this faith in God came down into our minds, into our hearts, into our bodies. So too, when we talk about the coming of Mashiach, it will come in the merit of our faith in God, despite the great concealment of godliness. We have to arouse our simple faith in God that Mashiach is coming, and it's about to happen. And this faith shouldn't just remain in a way that's hovering over us, something which is abstract, but just like in Egypt, that they bring it into their body, into their property. So too, we have to bring this faith in Hashem, faith in coming Mashiach, in a way that it goes into our minds, into our hearts, and even the lowest parts of ourselves, like the circumcision. And this is achieved by learning chassidus, Chabad chassidus. Chabad chassidus has the ability to bring our faith in God in a way that makes sense to us in our minds and affects our character. As Alter Rebbe said, the purpose of chassidus is to change the nature of our character, and this is a preparation for coming of Mashiach. As Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov, when will he come? He'll come, and the wellsprings of chassidus are spread to the outside. All right, Chazaka Baruch.
Chazaka Baruch.
Should see it happen. Yes.
Last question.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what the hierarchy in Egypt was, but in most countries, firstborn son is the king. So, is there any commentary about why Pharaoh was spared?
There's a commentary about this. It says in the Torah, only one remained, and Pharaoh came later, the king of Nineveh. God wanted him to see he wanted to reveal himself to Pharaoh further. Why Pharaoh merited that, that's a different discussion, but God wanted to reveal himself further to Pharaoh when he became the king of Nineveh. It's according to one opinion.
That's interesting.
Okay, we continue.
Okay.
Let's continue and bring the faith down into our minds. Let's think about it. Mashiach is coming today. Let's go. Chaim.
Amen.
Amen.